Welcome to our Tuesday, January 31, 2017 edition of the Government News Brief. In the news, technical and vocational education and training TVET programs to be expanded into 4 hinterland regions. The Passport Decentralization Program is benefiting more persons in hinterland communities, and citizens will have an opportunity to participate in Guyana's emerging oil and gas sector. Stay tuned for these and other stories. Thank you for staying with us. I am Renetta Lafleur. Here are the details. Schools in the hinterland are being prepared to offer technical vocational education to meet the needs of their communities and projected economic expansion. Paul McAdam reports.
This Caribbean Development Bank CDB-funded initiative has several components. These include meeting the emergent demand for a workforce with specialized skills in the newly established hinterland towns. Deputy Chief Education Officer with responsibility for technical education, Patrick Chinedu Uzriki, explains.
We are ensuring that giving the government of Guyana trust to develop 4 townships in Guyana, Region 1, Region 7, 8 and 9. We have refocused the CDB project to ensure that we develop skills in those 4 regions. We have in each of them there are 5 occupational areas at least we need to develop. Now this is to ensure that there is sufficient skills to help the towns grow and maintain some of their services and activities.
The institutions targeted for the interventions are Northwest, Madia, Bartica, and St. Ignatius secondary schools in the hinterland, and the Fellowship, Better for Acting, and Hopetown Practical Instructional Centers, PICs, on the coastland. It has been determined that 5 specific skills subjects will be offered at each school. Uzriki says that this was arrived at following consultations with the respective communities.
CDB project was approved last year, November. Consultation were held with them to actually identify the areas that we need to develop, because when we went to them, there were about 7, 8, 10 areas they wanted to concentrate about. At the meeting, we were emphatic that we needed them to tell us 5 most important, 5 most critical areas they believe that can have that economic benefit to the town.
The technical subjects to be taught at the schools are in line with the avenues for developing enterprises within the communities, Uzriki says.
St. Ignatius wanted to develop this leathercraft technology, right? We are in the Rupunini area. There used to be cattle rearing where they use the skin to make leathers and what have you. St. Ignatius Secondary and people in the community were adamant that that's one thing they wanted to develop. So we're going to go into that to ensure that we have that capacity going there. Now, in regions, I think Madia, Bartica, and Northwest, there is a need for this training on outboard engines, right? Because of the riverine community that they're based in.
Actual classes for the programs are not expected to start until 2020 or 2021. Over the course of the next 3 years, however, the ministry's focus will be on developing facilities, workshops, laboratories, and the training of teachers for the delivery of the program. In November of 2016, the government of Guyana received $12.3 million from the Caribbean Development Bank to enhance TVET education systems in Guyana. The project covers enhancing the TVET teaching and learning environment, improving the quality, relevance, and effectiveness of TVET instruction, strengthening capacity within the subsector, and enhancing second chance opportunity for at-risk and unskilled learners. Paul McAdam for the Government News Brief.
Minister of Citizenship says the decentralization program is progressing and bringing benefits to more persons in far-flung hinterland communities. Delon Sanko tells us more.
Minister of Citizenship Winston Felix says that the government is currently acquiring locations in Linden and New Amsterdam to set up offices. The minister notes that persons in the hinterland are among those who were able to apply for birth, marriage, and death certificates in their communities.
In New Amsterdam location, we have gone a stage further in terms of processing the papers. The Linden location, I'm at the initial stage. But we are still on the last year's program where we were dealing with New Amsterdam, Linden. We do some work in Puerto Rico. We're doing some visits to Lethem.
Minister Felix says that the ministry aims to provide the services in as many communities as possible, thereby eliminating the need for persons to travel to Georgetown, which can be time-consuming and costly.
So while these locations are not the core of the decentralization program, what we're doing is taking the service to as many locations as possible to ensure that the people get the service in the community and they don't have to be traveling to Georgetown and waste a lot of man hours to get a minor service done.
Minister Felix added that by the end of the fourth quarter of this year, persons in all the 10 administrative regions will be able to apply for birth, marriage, and death certificates in their communities. He says persons are appreciative of the service and have been making full use of it.
They are happy that the service is like within a hand's reach, and they are supporting it. They are coming in their numbers. And I think it is set now for general acceptance and use by others who may not have been familiar with it.
The Minister of Citizenship says the government is committed to providing improved services to all Guyanese in or as close as to their communities as possible. In the 2017 national budget, the sum of $625 million was allocated for citizenship and immigration services, including strategies to cover birth, death and marriage, insurance of work permit, and granting of citizenship. Delon Sanko for the Government News Brief.
Citizens will have an opportunity to share their concerns and ask questions on Guyana's emerging oil and gas sector in February when the Ministry of Natural Resources hosts a national outreach. Tiffany Rodius has the details.
Minister of Natural Resources Raphael Trotman says many persons want to hear more about Guyana's newest sector. He says the outreach will begin around the middle of February.
We hope to go to all 10 regions and to as many villages and communities as possible. And we hope at the same time not to just go by ourselves, but to work in tandem with other ministries.
Minister Trotman adds that his team is in the process of finalizing the outreach program, which will utilize traditional media and meetings to answer pressing questions persons may have about the emerging oil and gas sector.
I think this is a national resource, it is the people's resource, and so we've not to be able to go out and say to people, this is what has been discovered in Guyana, even though it is offshore Guyana. This is how the government proposes to develop the resource, to spend the money. These are the policies, these are the people who are advising us, and so to answer as many of the questions as possible, and if we don't have the answers immediately, to commit to providing them as soon as possible thereafter.
The National Outreach Program includes meeting with the parliamentary opposition, civil society, private sector commission, the diaspora and other specialty groups and institutions to specially brief them on the new oil and gas sector. For the Government News Brief, Tiffany Rogers.
NARI is working with international partners to improve the local coconut industry. Collaboration with foreign governments should produce higher yielding varieties, as we hear in this Delicia Haynes report.
The Ministry of Agriculture is currently engaged with the government of Mexico and Brazil to acquire elite planting materials to sustain the growing coconut industry. Chief Executive Officer of the National Agriculture Research and Extension Institute, NARI, Dr. Udo Homnot, said that the planting materials will be acquired in tissue forms and go through a series of tests before moving to the nursery stage. The acquisition of these planting materials supports the program for selection of the ideal species for coconut for production purposes.
The reason being that coconut is our major non-traditional export, and that has been going on for the last 5 years or so. That brings in approximately roughly on an average about 5 million US into the country. And it assists the coconut farmers in generating income.
The coconut industry has gained momentum since its vast and diverse production potential has been realized. With more than 10,000 coconut planting materials expected, nurseries at Monrepo, Vocational, and Charity are expected to be operationalized shortly. This will complement ongoing works at the Hope Estate on the east coast of Demerara.
With the expansion that is taking place, with new persons coming on board, especially in the Pomeroon and in Vocational, we recognize there's a demand for planting materials. People have been in the habit of selecting any and every nut for planting purposes. And when they realize when these things are ready to bear, as we say, the nuts are not of the quality that they would have expected.
The expansion of the coconut industry will be identified by the implementation of a 10-year roadmap to move the industry from being underdeveloped to a fully integrated partner at national, regional, and global levels. For the Government News Brief, Delicia Haynes.
The government is taking steps to ensure Guyanese athletes avoid using illegal enhancement drugs to improve their performances. Isaiah Braffett has the details.
The National Sports Commission is looking to introduce testing athletes for illegal performance enhancement substances. Director of Sports Christopher Jones says once Guyana adopts anti-doping laws, athletes participating in local competitions will be subject to testing. According to the sport director, anyone found positive for an illegal substance will face the consequences.
Any tournament and whatnot that we're funding is that those athletes will have to subject themselves to tests. And if they would have used in a few days recently, they see themselves being disqualified from participating.
Jones says that very soon the National Sports Commission will be interacting with the various associations and athletes on what is acceptable regionally and internationally as it relates to anti-doping.
On the world stage, anti-doping is huge. It's one of the most important things in part of any sporting body. But regionally, and in Guyana in particular, it's not something that is being driven by the sports authorities. So you have a lot of our locals will fall prey, that they believe that they can use these substances, participate in sports, do well, and that is what will elevate them. So essentially now it's setting that tone to them now that if you use those substances, you can't get farther than that.
In addition to sporting associations, Jones says the National Sports Commission will also be doing educational talks in schools.
Of course, we want to target pupils because, of course, sometime later they're going to move into that stream. So we're going to be doing programs in schools as well, educating them about anti-doping and what is the expectations of the regional and international body for persons who are involved in sports. So at least some of the youngsters will know that burning weed before you're playing football doesn't necessarily mean you can dribble well or score goals, because that's a perception.
According to Jones, the anti-doping initiative is another step in the right direction by the government to raise the standard of sport in Guyana. Isaiah Braffett for the Government News Brief.
That concludes today's edition of the Government News Brief. The details of these and other stories can be found on China's website. Stay updated, subscribe to our YouTube and website, and follow us on Facebook. The Government News Brief is a production of China. Do join us tomorrow for another edition of the Government News Brief. I am Renette Lafleur. Thank you for watching.